A word of warning, this podcast explores graphic and disturbing stories and includes some strong language. It therefore may not be suitable for our young listeners or other folks who may find it disturbing. Hello and welcome to True Crime Daily, the podcast covering high-profile and under-the-radar cases from across the country. Every week, I'm your host, Ana Garcia. Our cases this week, they're murder cases that have one thing in common. The accused killers here have allegedly kept notebooks detailing their heinous acts. Mexican authorities have arrested a potential serial killer who media outlets are calling the Mexican Jeffrey Dahmer because police say he had body parts in his apartment. If he's been killing women for 12 years, families of the victims are asking, how could the police not have known that there was a serial killer likely responsible for all of these murders? But first, police responding to a woman's attempted suicide. Well, that leads them to uncover a murder. As police read through her journal, they realized she may have killed her boyfriend, which she did. The complication was that no one knew the man was missing because she sent text messages to his family and friends pretending to be him. So no one, not even his own mother, knew that he was gone. We are recording this on Thursday, May 2nd of 2024. Our guest today is Danny Smith, a former homicide detective and an author of the Dickie Floyd detective series. You are a prolific author. You just came out with a new book, didn't you?
I did, Anna, and thank you. Yes, I just published the 8th book in the Dickie Floyd series, the 8th novel, and it's called The First Felony, and it's been doing great. And then I have the one spinoff series that I need to get back to, and the memoir. So a total of 10 published now.
Amazing. Amazing. So it's kind of perfect that we're talking to you because here you are taking all these notes and you started writing, as we've shared many times before. For those who are new to the podcast, you started writing as a form of therapy to deal with your PTSD from the horrific crimes that you investigated. So it's interesting to me that in these two cases, the notebooks and the journals kept by the accused killers is paramount and central to the investigation.
Yeah, I mean, it's great when people leave evidence like that. It's terrific. But yeah, very, very interesting cases that you're going to talk about today.
So, both our cases are international. And the first one is out of Northampton, England, where a school teacher who journaled the details about murdering her boyfriend has now been convicted. She had 2 trials. The first one had to be tossed out on a legal technicality, and then she finally went back to trial again and finally pleaded guilty. I mean, this drama has been going on for quite a few years. The killer here is 50-year-old Fiona Beale, and she has pleaded guilty to murdering her boyfriend, Nicholas Billingham, who was 42 at the time. Police say that she lured him with the promise of sex and then convinced him to wear an eye mask in order to help him relax. Therefore, he could not see the knife coming his way. So
And tied him to the bed.
And tied him to the bed to keep him in position. Exactly. Right. He thought he was going to have a night of, adventurous sex, and she had different plans for him. Yeah. So we never saw it coming. Yeah. All right. So let's get to this. Now, for me, the backstory here is how they discovered the murder, that they figured out that someone had been killed, because prior to this, no one was investigating the case. So I just find that fascinating. A little bit of history on the two of them. And then I kind of want to go back in time, because the revelation of what could be a man buried in the backyard only happened because she was suicidal several months later, with the presumably all of the guilt troubling her. So prior to the murder, Fiona was working as a school teacher, instructing year 6, as they say, in Eastville Academy. And Nicholas was a builder by trade. Fiona and Nicholas had been dating for like 17 years. I mean, this is a very long relationship. Fiona said that the relationship had deteriorated around the COVID lockdown in 2020. And that she claimed that he was abusive and very cruel, especially during sex. She said that he would spit on her, and this is both what she said to the police and also what would be in her journals. So the final straw for her apparently was that she thought he was having an affair with a woman down the street. And all of this is explained in her journal. But what's also interesting is a lot of the journal, Danny is rambling, and she also writes in a third person, somebody named Tulip 22. Do you ever?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like an alter ego for her that she created this other individual, and that individual journaled everything that happened with the murder. And like you said, it's a good thing that, ultimately when she was having her mental breakdown, finally, because initially after this, people said that she was fairly normal when she came back to work and said that, he had left and was gone, ran off with another woman, that she was fairly normal. But apparently, like what tends to happen in these things, it started to bother her enough that she started having some mental issues over it, and at one point contemplated and even maybe attempted suicide. Sounds like kind of a hesitation type deal, but anyway, yeah. Otherwise, I don't know. They may they may never have come upon it. I don't know. It was a well thought out case on her part, truthfully.
Yeah. And what she did was she bought herself almost 2 weeks' time because she called in sick and said, "We both have COVID, therefore we must isolate." And then she told all her friends and family, "We have COVID. So therefore, no one's going to come calling, no one's going to come around." And since she had her boyfriend's cell phone and was pretending to be him messaging, nothing seemed suspicious in that time period. And it was during that precious time period where you see her, for example, at a local hardware store with like bags and bags, the really big ones that are very hard to carry, of compost and other items. If she's got COVID, what is she doing with so much gardening? And what she's doing is she's building a makeshift grave in the backyard. In the backyard. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the amazing thing. And it's not like it's a big house and a big yard.
right. Well, and
Uh,
I mean, her efforts on this were pretty phenomenal from the start. Not well thought out, because when you stab someone in the throat, when you cut their throat, it the potential for blood spraying, as far as 20, 30 feet is realistic. So I'm sure the scene was just an absolute mess, and it took her a long time to clean up. I mean, she had to buy the time because, and it was upstairs. She had to get this man's body downstairs and buried. And I mean, she did all of this by herself. And I mean, that's commitment. She, she had a lot of work to do. None of that is easy. Not,
no, and she
I
writes
don't know
in
if she,
Yeah, she writes in the journal that it was not easy. It's not as easy as it
yeah,
looks on television. And the difficulty of trying to get him down the stairs, and then outside, she ended up breaking part of her banister. And yeah, the bed, the sheets. And this is the part that doesn't make much sense is while she replaced those items, and she even used the poor dead man's Amazon account to
right,
buy some of these cleaning supplies and also the repair or the replacement items, she left that bloody stuff, the mattress and all that, in the basement because I guess she hadn't figured out how to get rid of it.
right.
That too is a big item.
Yeah. Yeah. Parts of, I mean, she was definitely committed. She, she certainly worked hard to accomplish her goal, but, yeah, it wasn't real well thought out. Clearly it's premeditated, but as far as the actual planning, I mean, just the fact that she killed him in her own home, created a lot of difficulty that she obviously had not foreseen.
So Nicholas was murdered in November of 2021, but his body was not discovered until March of 2022. This is important because this is the time period where he's missing, but nobody knows that he's missing. So nobody's looking for him. And then it would be in February. So he's discovered in March. and February, Fiona is having a mental health crisis. And she took a break from her regular life and rented a cabin in Cumbria, which is about 230 miles away from her home. Her family, very worried about her. She's not acting right. Something's wrong. And so the family asks the police, please do a welfare check. And that is when police discovered that Fiona was in a true state of distress. They had found what looked like suicide notes. She had superficial wounds like she had been trying to harm herself. So she was taken to the hospital and detained under the English Mental Health Act, which is, a version of what we have here. So as officers are trying to figure out what's going on with this woman, they discovered the journals, basically the murder outline. And she had written about how she had murdered her boyfriend, disposed of the body, how long it took her. And when she was questioned about this, she says, "Oh, I don't remember a thing," even though everything's in detail in her book. So the journals were also confusing to investigators. That's why it took a little time to figure this all out, because Fiona wrote under that different name, Tulip 22. And she also claimed to police, as I guess they're starting to zero in on her and what's really happened. Then she claimed she had multiple personalities, and Tulip was one of them. So, one of the quotes from the book: "Hiding a body was bad. Moving a body is much more difficult than it looks on TV." Yeah. So it was these disturbing journal entries that triggered the police investigation now toward a murder investigation, or at the very least, a missing persons investigation. Now, remember, Nicholas has not been seen since November 1st of 2021. So police contacted Fiona's employer, and then they found out that she was absent from November 1st to the 12th. That's when she called out with, claiming she had COVID. So now police, if you have this, I'm curious, Danny, if you were presented with this book and half of it doesn't make sense, and then you're making these inquiries and you're realizing, geez, nobody's seen this man in a while, and that's kind of weird. How does this trigger the next part of the investigation?
Well, typically something like this, the first thing you would do is recognize that the boyfriend's no longer living. That, it'd be like a no body case where you first would put your efforts at proving that the person no longer lives, not that they just ran off with a woman, or that they, got tired of their life and checked out. And there's a variety of ways that you do that, and it's actually important for the future court case if a body's never discovered in a no body type prosecution, and I've been involved in two of those. But anyway, you would first do that, and if she still has his cell phone, I don't know if she's still using it at this point or not, but that's going to become exceptionally important, because they'll be able to see where the activity has been generated from on the phone, and it'll come right back to her home. But those are the things that you would do. You'd first start to say, okay, something's wrong. Something's clearly not right with her journal and the things that she's talking about. Clearly there's been a death. The most likely person would be the boyfriend. So let's first try to figure out whether or not he is or is not living. And that would be a starting point.
So the book, again, written from the perspective of this Tulip 22, one entry said, quote, "I have to confess, okay, here goes. October 2021, he spat on me and threatened me during sex. I thought about leaving, but the things he said and did fueled my dark side. I call her Tulip 22. She's reckless, fearless, and efficient, ruthless." So she also wrote about planning this crime. Quote, "I started plotting as Tulip 22 after he'd gone to bed. I could no longer sleep in the bed due to my breathing being too loud, or that I moved so much that I snored." So apparently, there was a lot of complaining here. This was not a happy couple. Right?
No.
So she appears to have started the plotting a few days beforehand, purchasing the utility knife, a chisel, some cable ties, all of these things before Nicholas was even killed. According to prosecutors, in the evening hours of November 1st of 2021, Fiona lured Nicholas with the promise of sex after a bath. That's when she got him in this vulnerable position, tied him all up, and then put the sleep mask over him. And then she stabbed him in the neck. At about 1 a.m., the cleanup and the cover-up started. She was quite brazen, again, making these purchases on his Amazon account. So it's like, she's not done with the disrespect here. So after stabbing Nicholas, Fiona wrote that she wrapped her dead partner up and dragged him down the stairs. The difficulty of carrying that man, because he was so heavy, again, broke a lot of the banister, and that she then wrapped his body and created a makeshift grave in the garden, and that is where she put him. So at this point, of course, only Fiona knows that Nicholas is dead. And she had gone ahead and texted all her friends that they were sick. Then she starts texting her friends saying, you know what, we broke up and he left. And then she, pretending to be him, sent a text message to Nicholas's mother. Nicholas's mother believed that he had left town, had found a new woman, and was very happy. And so her feeling was, well, it's a little unusual, but I hope that my son's happy. I guess what I'm trying to say is these signs may not have seemed completely atypical for Nicholas, right? However he lived his life and his relationship with his mother. And the amazing thing is that at Christmas time, the mother ends up later recounting how Fiona invited her over for a drink and she sat there having a drink. Meanwhile, her son is just a few feet from her in the garden.
Right.
And how vicious that feels.
Yeah, no, it's the whole story is pretty amazing. And interestingly enough, they still had some difficulty initially prosecuting, and I'm sure you're going to talk about that. But I was it reminded me of a case that I handled where a woman and her then husband killed their mother. And while researching this woman, we found out that 20 some years earlier, she had killed her husband, shot him while he was sleeping in his bed. And then the investigation was kind of botched. It was a Northern California agency, and they had thought it was a suicide. They had taken her word for it until the autopsy. Well, my whole point is that eventually they give her this manslaughter case, and she does 18 months for murdering her husband while he's sleeping, and then later goes on to kill her own mother. So this case, I'm reminded of that because of there was a time in this instance where she was going to just get a voluntary manslaughter and be out in no time.
So there was after they finally found the body, and of course they notified the family, the mother, and said, Nicholas isn't just missing, he's been murdered. The first trial began in June of 2023, and there were multiple complications involving a witness who apparently was connected to Fiona, and when that was finally revealed, I'm making this as simple as possible because we could go down a rabbit hole there. The judge had to dismiss the case. So then they had a second trial. And in that second trial, which began April 19th of this year of 2024, days into it, she stopped the proceedings and she decided that she would plead guilty to Nicholas's murder. And then when the judge confirmed Fiona's plea in court, he told her that the charge would carry a life sentence, and Fiona tearfully moved forward with her plea. So she's now scheduled for a 2-day sentencing hearing. I guess that's when they're going to bring in, mitigating factors. Was she indeed mentally ill? And then, of course, the family and the friends can speak up for Nicholas and say, no, this was pretty cruel. And this was not just, a moment of insanity. This was a long term.
Yeah, the premeditation changes everything about the case, and that will factor in heavily during sentencing, thankfully.
Yeah, very, very interesting case. I do think that her taking the plea probably made this easier on everyone because the details that come out during these trials are very hard on the survivors of the victims' families. Just so hard for them. So it's a case that has gripped the United Kingdom for some time. It's also gotten some headlines here because of all of the different parts to this, and who suspects the school teacher.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though. These types of cases, they're unforeseeable to most of us. It just, it's one of those typical deals where the media's out talking to neighbors and everyone's shaking their head saying, we never could have imagined.
Yeah. I also found it interesting at one point that when she came back from her whole away for COVID, that people were remarking, this was for a short period of time, how well she looked. She had apparently lost some weight, pulled herself together, and looked like, a better version of herself immediately following this, horrific, almost 2 week uh, exercise of a murder that she went ahead and plotted. And then it was later that she started deteriorating. Then she started
Yeah.
falling apart. I just found that part of it very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot to wear. You know what I mean? It's a heck of a lot to take on, and she's basically living a lie in this facade, and she ultimately cracked.
Yeah. Inviting the mother over for a Christmas cocktail, that takes a lot of balls.
I don't know if that's weird or cruel or what. I mean, it's such an interesting thing that she would do that, and you have to wonder, well, is it cockiness? Is it being cruel? Is it just some strange, weird thing that she gets off on? I mean, it's hard to understand that, but it certainly wouldn't be what most people would do.
It
I
could
mean,
have been
most people wouldn't do this anyways, but
no, no. And I think maybe there could have been part of a cover up that maybe she knows that Nicholas is dead. She's been with him for 17 years, maybe has a close relationship with the mother. And to not have her over might have seemed weird. But you know what? If you break up with someone, I don't think the parents expect you to continue a relationship with them. So I'm kind of siding more with you than with this part of the cover up portion.
yeah, I mean, it's hard to say for sure, but I mean, it could be just as simple as that she thought that this would be another step in looking, appearing as if everything is normal.
Yeah, well, looks like Fiona's going away for the rest of her life. Our next case is out of Mexico City, where police say a suspected serial killer allegedly kept the bones of 6 different women in his apartment. The suspected serial killer has been dubbed the Mexican Jeffrey Dahmer by the media there, and ABC7 in Los Angeles has identified him as Miguel Cortez. But in the Mexican legal system, I guess suspects are only referred to publicly by their first names. So they keep referring to him as Suspect Miguel, but ABC7 has spoken with friends and family members of his alleged victims, and so they have named him. According to the Daily Mail, Miguel was a pharmaceutical chemist at a local hospital, fluent in 3 languages. Okay, so the kind of guy, right, works, can talk to anybody in an international city, right? So in his spare time, he loved to travel. Makes sense. Prosecutors have said that, now this bugs me. They said, and everything has to be translated, but that he didn't show any signs of violence or aggressive behavior in his daily life that would make anyone ever suspect him. Now, that seems to me like such a cop out for the police to say, well, of course we weren't looking at him. There, he was so normal. I'm just like, most people are.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I don't, what they said probably was true, kind of like a Ted Bundy who can just go through life and everyone thinks he's the greatest person on earth. So with serial killers, that's not a surprising attribute, but yeah, and how the authorities presented that, I think, is a little bit of pushback on people saying, "Man, how many bodies have to pile up before the cops down here figure things out?" So,
yes, and there's been a lot of pushback from the families of victims and the community at large, very critical of the police department for letting this go on for as long as it apparently did, and again for not looking at the clues here and connecting the dots and saying, well, hold on a second. These women have been murdered in a similar manner, in a similar area. Could there be a serial killer? Because that would have been a warning for the public. And the police have defended themselves and said, well, you know what? We're not that well trained because we don't have enough money and we are understaffed. And the guy looked normal. You know what? That is not a good enough answer. They may all be true, but that's just not a good enough answer.
yeah, yeah, and I can't speak to their level of training or their professionalism or anything else. I truly don't know anything about the police in Mexico City. The job itself is not a coveted position. They don't get a lot of people that want to be cops down there because it is a very, very dangerous thing to be because of the cartels. The cartels
Right.
kill cops and chiefs of police and mayors and everyone else. So I would venture to say that it's true that they probably don't have some, very well trained or experienced investigators that would jump onto this and be able to work it. Um, but once they have it, I mean, you would think that they would be able to muddle their way through it.
Well, one would think, but no. So here's how the suspect was caught. He broke into the apartment of a neighbor. So his crime, according to police, was committed in the same building in which he lives, making
Yeah.
it fairly easy to track him down. Also, the fact when someone starts killing so close to home, um, I don't know. What does that indicate to you that what's changing about the MO?
Confidence.
Mhm.
A lot of times a serial killer will also start killing more frequently as time goes on. And a lot of that's built on confidence. And a lot of it's also driven by this need, this desire to do it again. The act of killing, especially, these serial killers, and if there's sexual components to it, it's a bloodlust and they need more of it.
So he was caught when he broke into the apartment of a neighbor identified by a family member as Cassandra Callis. And on April 16th, that would be of last month, Miguel reportedly waited for the neighbor to leave before entering the apartment where he sexually assaulted and killed her 17-year-old daughter. So his target was the daughter. He waited for the mother to leave. And the daughter's been identified as Maria Jose Castillo. So when Cassandra, this would be the mother, returned to the apartment, she just went to the corner store. See, that's the thing that he didn't plan on. He didn't know where she was going and how long she would be gone. She wasn't gone very long. This is what she told police and what she told her relatives here in the US, that she saw Miguel standing over her daughter's body, and that then he approached her and he stabbed the mother and then he took off. The mother survived the attack, but the teen did not. The teen did not. So Cassandra's sister here in Santa Ana told Fox 11 that the mother was stabbed multiple times. These wounds reportedly included punctures to the leg, the pelvic area, the neck. I mean, he really went at the mother. Now, he was quickly identified by neighbors, and then they held him down until the police could get there. Authorities searched the man's apartment, and they claimed that they recovered evidence to clearly indicate that they're looking at a serial killer of women. Investigators claim that they recovered biological material. They're not really elaborating, but there's speculation that that would mean what? Like very specific body parts, like of the flesh, as opposed to some of the bones that they found.
Yeah, I didn't understand exactly what they were saying either, but between that and the reference to Jeffrey Dahmer, it makes you wonder if there weren't, parts that were saved and frozen or whatever.
Yeah, pieces of flesh. They
Yeah.
also found the ID cards of the missing women, along with the cell phones that belonged to the missing women. Those were his trophies. So, of course, in some ways, that made it possible for them to contact the families as quickly as possible. Prosecutors are now claiming that it's 6 fatalities that they seem fairly certain of, and an attempted 7th victim, which would be the mother that broke in on him, and that his killing spree went back 12 years. So, on top of everything else, right, as if there's not enough here, he kept a journal on what he did. Allegedly, this is what police are saying. He kept a journal about what he did and who he did it to.
Yeah, it's very helpful. I mean, as an investigator, you just love that. But it'd be interesting to see if when those things are brought to light in a court of law or wherever, if it truly is limited to the 6 that they're now claiming, as victims. Because right away, the first thing I think of is, this guy's he's good. He's able to fit in with any environment setting. He's a world traveler and he speaks several languages. And I would like, if I were the investigator, I'd certainly be looking at that trail of places that he's visited and see what kind of body count, unsolved cases are there that are similar in the MO.
Yeah. I mean, and some of these women, they were the fact that he has bones and perhaps pieces of flesh. What is unclear is where the rest of the victim is. Like, did he destroy the rest of the body? Are they buried? Because it's, from my understanding, what we have here is a bunch of families who have loved ones who have just disappeared.
Right.
As opposed to trying to figure out who killed their loved one, they're trying to figure out what happened to their loved ones. Like, they just vanished.
Yeah. And, who knows if they'll ever be able to identify, even parts is helpful. If there's even parts that are recovered so that a family can, have a service and say that, we brought her home, that's helpful. But in a case like this, I wouldn't expect it.
Now, one of the victims, police say that Frida Sofia Lima had actually dated Miguel before her disappearance in 2015. So one would think if they were dating, and I don't know if they were just casually dating or they were in a relationship, if she disappears in 2015, who are they going to speak to besides relatives and friends? The boyfriend or the guy she was dating.
Right. Yeah. And again, I mean, that's where I can't really speak to, the investigators down there. I just don't know, what training they have, how far they look into things and if they have the experience to work those types of cases. But it seems as if there was ample evidence in some of these other cases that could have and should have at least put this guy on a radar.
Yes, one would think, certainly when his girlfriend disappeared. Miguel is currently being held for trial on charges related to the murder and then the attempted murder of the two most recent victims, while the police figure out and positively identify the others and I guess build a case. Because if you can get him on these two and the victim who survived can positively identify him, that will certainly weigh very strongly because the DNA evidence will be the freshest. So, but I am by no means suggesting that if they're fortunate enough to get a conviction on these last two victims, that shouldn't be enough for everyone. That shouldn't be like, well, he's going to be in prison for the rest of his life. So, no. I think he should be tried on every single possible victim that they can tie him to.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Anna. It's not good enough. It's not good enough for the family members, the loved ones of the other victims, who want their piece of flesh, so to speak. And it's not good enough because, I'm sure their legal system is as flawed as ours is. So if you can stack life after life after life on a person, then, that's what as a former homicide detective, that's what I prefer. I don't like sentences being commuted later when you have truly evil people that need to stay away from society.
Agreed. And certainly in this case. Now, since Miguel's arrest, family members of missing women have gone to the apartment building where he lived, and they've started putting photos and posters of their loved ones all over the building with the hopes that people there, either in the neighborhood or in the building, might recognize one of their loved ones and say, wait a minute, I think I may have seen her with him. Yeah. So we'll be following this case, and we hope that there's justice for all these families. Well, it is time for our comments section. These are the crime cases that you all are talking about on social media, and here's our producer, Will Updike. Hey, Will, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good, thank you.
Good to see you, Danny. So this week we have a case of a mannequin morning commute. This case comes out of Santa Fe Springs, California, where a driver trying to be clever with the carpool lane ended up in double trouble after they were pulled over by California Highway Patrol. Now, so according to California Highway Patrol, an officer with the division, Officer Kaplan, made a stop on a vehicle in question here for crossing solid double lines, only to realize that the driver was in the car with a dummy trying to pass this off as a passenger so they could use the carpool lane to avoid heavy traffic. Now, I'll show the viewers here a picture of this dummy.
It's pretty good looking.
Yeah, I mean, describe it for
it looks pretty lifelike.
Yeah. So it's, it looks very human-like. It's got a hood up, some sunglasses on. One thing that the officers pointed out that they noticed, though, was that the goatee on the dummy looked like a little too sharp. Like the facial hair was just like, it's a little too clean. So obviously this was pretty easy to point out. And the driver was issued a citation for multiple carpool violations. And CHP gave some advice. They said, just remember to plan ahead, know your route of travel and the general challenges of your drive to avoid being in a rush or tempted to push your luck. And they also just had some general advice for people asking, if a mannequin is in the passenger seat, is that a second occupant? No, roundly no.
No.
But they did.
Well, hang on.
What?
In the driver's defense, the cops have been doing this for a long time, right? They set a radio car, a patrol car on the side of the road, put a mannequin in there. I think the driver ought to take that to court and say, hey, they do the same thing, man. They fake us out with their mannequins.
Oh, you haven't seen it? Yeah, they do it for safety reasons, like not safety, but for like deterrence of crime.
Deterrence,
for sure.
Yeah, like to slow down because the vehicle is parked there, especially on the side of the highway or something like that. But there's nobody in there. Like they even do it here at the Grove. Like they'll just park a car, a police car. But usually there's not a mannequin in there. But that's kind of funny. I like that, Danny.
I really like that thinking.
I like that thinking.
But they did commend the driver on their efforts here. They said, we got to give it to him. The appearance is next level modeling, but at the end of the day, plastic is plastic. Unclear what's going to happen with this driver. As I said,
but do you think that he would have been caught had he not done that stupid move?
No,
crossing the double lines. If he just entered, I don't think anybody would have caught him.
No, I don't. I think if you hadn't done both things, but I feel like if you're bold enough to maybe have the full-time mannequin in the car to use the carpool lane, you might be pushing your luck in other areas. You know what I'm saying? It might just be the tip of the iceberg. But we got a lot of comments on this one. Jules N actually commended this driver. They said, I love this as someone who lives in a high traffic area. I completely understand. I mean, we've all been there, in that carpool lane, moving much more quickly than wherever we're stuck in traffic. Shiros V actually commended the safety of the mannequin. They said at least he's safe. He is wearing his seatbelt, which, if you see the picture, they did put the dummy in a seatbelt, which is a good move. I don't know if that's something the cameras could pick up. I wonder. Can they issue you a ticket for not wearing your seatbelt from a camera? I don't know.
That part I don't know. Danny, do you know?
No, I've never been a traffic cop, so I don't know.
Yeah, because here, we have those Metro passes. So when you go into the carpool lane, like if you have it, you can pay extra if you're a single driver. Yeah. You just have to click it to one, but you'll be either not charged anything or far less if you click it to 2 or 3 people, which some people either do intentionally as to not be charged, or they do it because they forgot. Like last time they used it, they had 3, you're driving and you're trying to, like with me with my glasses on, like, what does that say? Is that 1, 2, or 3? And then if as you can tell, I drive the carpool lane a lot with this device. And then if, so somehow it reads how many people you claim to have in the car. And then the traffic cop will come up right beside you and double check how many are in the car. Like that has happened to me.
Yeah. I feel like people sometimes think in the carpool lane too, they like can't get pulled over. You know what I mean? Like sometimes in that carpool lane, there's people going like 90, which I mean, whatever. But it's like you can still get pulled over there.
Yes.
It is a fast pass, but it's not international waters or something. Alicious A had some comments on how to actually improve this act. They said they should have put a hat on them, then we'd be in business. Maybe the hat with a little bit of shade would have covered up the goatee a little bit more. I'm not sure. Maybe they should have gone clean shaven on the mannequin. I'm not positive on that one. Appalachia pointed out like another case of this that I was unfamiliar with. They said somebody did this in the 90s and the judge made them hold a mannequin with a sign saying carpool lanes are not for dummies, which as sort of just like a poetic justice thing. I guess I kind of like that idea.
Bring it back then. Bring it back, Will.
Yeah, just something like that. Just something like that. And Colomite ending this one out. I like their comment. They said, which one is the dummy? Which, hey.
Well, I have to agree because, again, had he not gone over the double lines, the cop wouldn't have bothered him.
Yeah,
He'd probably be sailing along in the damn carpool lane, but no.
I mean, it's not as serious, but it's like some of the cases we cover on here where somebody has a body in the trunk, but they're pulled over because their registration tag is out of date or something. Right. It's like, yeah.
Or they failed to stop at the stop sign,
Yeah.
Look, you got a body in the car.
Yeah. If you're already like committing a crime, maybe don't stack other ones on top of it. Maybe just try to fly under the radar. But that is going to do it for this week's comment section. I want to thank everybody who sent those in. You can do that over on our YouTube community page. You can also reach out to us anytime. We're over on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. But until next week, thank you so much.
Danny, thank you so much for coming back. It was such a pleasure to have you. And your insight is always fascinating. And the fact that, you've morphed into this other career, this second career, which is quite successful as an author, I just think is so cool, is so cool.
Thank you. And I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure. Where can people find you, your books, and all that good stuff?
Well, I'm on most social media, Danny R. Smith. I've got a website, murdermemo.com or dickiefloydnovels.com. And all my books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. There's a few Audible books, but most of them are available in print, or all of them are available in print and ebook form. Excellent.
You can find me at Anna G News, and you can find this episode, all our episodes of True Crime Daily, the podcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can either listen to us, you can watch, however you want to consume. I think we got you covered. We even have a newsletter for you at truecrimedaily.com. So until next week, I'm your host, Ana Garcia. This is True Crime Daily, the podcast. And as we always say, don't do crime.